The I say the following. I know Professor will be happy because I'm stealing from your presentation, but I'm going to do it anyway. Tell me if you recognize this very paragraph that I'm going to read out. With the deadline of the 2020 agenda fast approaching, it's essential that we think critically about the necessary knowledge and transformation that are required to address the world's greatest problems. Higher education are uniquely positioned to contribute to the social, economic, and environmental transformation that are required to address world's most issues. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, what I understand is, as academics, as researchers, we are very good at pontificating. We are very good at making sweeping statements. And of course, we are good at thesis in terms of what needs to be done and what should not be done. We also need to agree, before I call in my learned professor, that all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, none of those can be achieved or can gain proper traction without the involvement of institutions of higher learning, colleges, universities, even basically schools. Of course, again, universities are pegged against development goal number 4, if you go to that litany of goals. But that does not mean that we cannot look beyond that particular goal. Today's plenary session, I'm told that it is themed as follows. Can collaboration replace competition? The role of higher education institutions in contributing to impacting society through sustainable development goals. That is the theme. And then who best to address us on this issue other than Professor Jose, because we had this thing, whether it's Jose or Jose, but then Jose Franz. That is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation, University of the Western Cape. I'm not going to do too much of your bio sketch, Prof, but if you allow me, maybe 2 liners. Otherwise, I cannot be on the stage with a person I don't know. With that said, Professor Joseph Franz is responsible for the strategic vision of research and innovation at the University of the Western Cape, of course. Prior to this, he held numerous leadership positions, such as the Dean of the Faculty of Community and Health Science, and the Dean of Research and Postgraduate Studies. Her strategic interests include promoting an advancement of research for impact through knowledge, exchange, and capacity building. With that said, Prof, the question is, do we collaborate or do we compete? The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Good morning, everybody. I thought when I was here this morning at 8 o'clock, and there were so few people, if we had started on time, Prof. Sibanda, it would have been a smaller audience that I had to speak to. But now we had delays, as only South Africa can have, and now the audience is much bigger. But I want to take this opportunity to start by just thanking the SANORD committee for inviting me to have this address here this morning. I was glad to be part of the session yesterday morning, and one of the speakers said, when you stand here on stage, you gentlemen, when you stand here on stage, you can be provocative and you can, generate some ideas that's not, how can I say, normal, but we can ask the questions so that we can start thinking about things. So I'm hoping that this morning the presentation will get us to start thinking just a little bit differently. A lot of it is not different, but it's just asking questions in terms of moving forward. We heard that we only have about 7 to 8 years left for SDG 2030, but where do we move to from there? So let me start. The opportunity that SANORD provides us is really a unique opportunity, and was started by leaders many years ago when they had a clear vision in terms of where we are wanting to go. The question I have every time I come to these conferences, are we still true to that vision? And are we still upholding what the then VCs at the time thought that we're needing to do? Combining universities from the north and the universities from the south was a very big vision. And at the time, I know, when this was started, it was that the north will come and impart knowledge on the south. But over the years, SANORD has evolved and developed where it's an equal partnership and sharing of information. And so for me, that is unique in terms of what SANORD offers for us to move forward. Various conferences have been held, and we had various discussions where we spoke about various things. In 2017, and I'm only taking the last 5 years, we were in Zimbabwe, and we were talking about the role of universities in research and technology transfer to improve the livelihoods in Southern Africa. In 2018, we were in Jyväskylä in Finland, where we spoke about academic citizenship. And my main focus at that time was around resilience and how do we build this resilience. In Botswana, we were able to talk about the role of higher education in forging sustainable livelihoods. And then we skipped a year somewhere along the line, I think, University of Bergen, 2020, COVID came. But we were able to do it online, I think, in 2021, right, Ellen? Where we spoke about the importance of partnerships. And here we are today, speaking about this nexus between SDGs and South-North partnerships once again. What has happened over the years? This build-up that we have towards various topics and identifying what the needs are in our countries, are we really making a difference in terms of higher education institutions? The past month, in South Africa, I know for sure, everybody was talking about the Times Higher Education university rankings. Who's the top university in the country? Who's the top university in the world? The conversation was just around that. And this is what the rankings looked like. The Times Higher Education World University Rankings, Oxford, California Institute of Technology, Harvard, Stanford, Cambridge University. These were the top universities that were emerging in terms of the Times Higher Education University rankings. And then we looked at the SDG impact rankings and look at which countries were emerging as the top countries around SDGs. It's definitely not the ones on the left. It's definitely not the Harvards or the Stanfords or the Cambridge universities. Look which countries are on the top. Doesn't that resonate with you in terms of the impact that we are making in terms of our contribution as institutions, as countries? Are we interested in the data on the left, or are we interested in the data on my right? Which data are you interested in? Because the data on the left talks about competition, but the data on the right talks about collaboration. I see the smiles in the Finland colleagues here this morning, and you need to smile. And so I want to this morning just share highlight two documents that talks to higher education institutions and why our contribution is so important. And the first one, I'm sure you know, is this UNESCO document, Knowledge-Driven Actions Transforming Higher Education for Global Sustainability. And the second one is Sustainable Development Report 2022. And this Sustainable Development Report 2022 gives us an indication of our countries in terms of what we are doing, in terms of reaching the 17 goals, SDG goals, that we talk about. Let me just show you what your country looks like. But before I do that, I need to just tell you why I'm doing this. So we had a VC in the past who used to talk about a culture of sense-making. We do not need to accept everything that is presented to us. We need to make sense for ourselves in terms of what it is that we are dealing with. So in 2010 to 2014, this is what our picture looked like. This is South Africa. This is Cape Town. This is where our university is based. On the one hand, we have the haves, and on the other hand, we have the have-nots. In one country, in one town, in one city, we have a first world opportunity as well as a third world opportunity. And the question I ask in terms of the sense-making is, does the top represent the north and the bottom represent the south? Is that what we are saying? I'm trying to make sense of what it is that the SANORD opportunity offers for us. Let me just share with you what your data looks like in terms of, you may know, but others may not, in terms of the report on the SDGs. So number one, obviously you saw, was Finland. And these are the achievements they have made in terms of the SDGs. The red is when you are still working very hard towards achieving. The green is where you have really made progress. The orange is we are staying the same, and the yellow we're still getting there. And so this is what Finland looks like. Second is Denmark. These are the pictures that Denmark looks like. Third, this is what Sweden looks like. And fourth, this is what Norway looks like. So you are achieving, but in terms of SDGs, you have not made it. You're not there yet. Not one of these countries are there. And these are considered countries that have resources, that are able to do what they need to do in their country. That's our perception, right? This is what the South looks like. South Africa, no green, lots of red. This is what Namibia looks like. This is what Botswana looks like. And this is what Zimbabwe looks like. So what are we saying in terms of sense-making? In terms of understanding, we are all working towards these SDG goals, but how are we balancing it out in terms of where we are wanting to go? Just a picture for you to see the north versus the south. And if you are able to look very closely, there are common overlaps in areas where we are all not achieving in terms of moving these SDG goals forward. So my question is, do we collaborate or do we compete with each other to really make this slide look very green? At the moment, it's not very green for not one country represented there. I also want to present that priorities of SDSN investment talks about education and social protection as SDG 4 and 1, health systems, SDG 3, zero carbon energy, SDG 7, 12, and 13, universal digital services, SDG 9, and sustainable urban infrastructure, SDG 11. That is what that report highlights in terms of the areas that they are going to fund moving forward, because they also realize we are at a stage where we need to do something. And so when you look at this slide, this is what they're going to fund, based on looking at all the countries to see where are the areas that we are still struggling to achieve. The next report I want to just highlight is this UNESCO report. If you have engaged with this report gives us a lot of information in terms of where we're wanting to go. I'm just going to highlight the three main focus areas. One is the need to move towards interdisciplinary modes of producing and circulating knowledge. Two, becoming open institutions, and 3, the demand for a stronger presence in society through proactive engagement and partnering. That's what we're talking about here on a regular basis when we come to these SANORD conferences in terms of what we're wanting to drive forward. This report has several recommendations. I highlight but 3, and it's linked to the ones that I'm focusing on this morning. That is the interdisciplinarity, the dialogue for diverse communities, and partnerships, which is important. I'm not saying you do not know, I'm just highlighting things that I think is important for us to discuss. When we talk about interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, what does it really mean for us? Do we have a narrative that we are talking about when we talk about these SDGs? Or are we just saying that we are looking at everything through different lenses? It's not just about different lenses. It's actually about creating a new lens for us to look at the world in terms of societal challenges. Is that really what we are doing? The second part is around fostering diverse ways of knowing, and we had discussions around that. And the one thing that was important for us to highlight was our own context. I put that picture up there around equality and equity. And it's about how to cook. In South Africa, there's this whole thing emerging around air fryers and how to make food quickly in the air fryer. But if I'm on the moon, is my air fryer going to work? It sounds like a simple example, but it's talking about our context. Is the context and the solutions that we have in the north going to work in the south? Or should we be having a different conversation in terms of what it is that we're wanting to achieve? This, for us, is very important. Diversity, inclusion, and equity. How do we relate to this? How do we talk about this? Even in our partnerships, are we talking equity or equality? Those rankings that I showed, what does those rankings mean? Who decided on the methodology of those rankings? And so is it really talking about our context, and is it really talking about equity? I was saying in a conversation in my own university, we're doing so much good work, but we never shift on these rankings. Why is it? And yet we impact our communities around us on a daily basis. Why are we not shifting on the rankings? Because the rankings are not taking into consideration what we as universities are doing and the conversations that we are actually having in our communities in terms of how we impact our society, in terms of how we impact our staff, in terms of how we impact our students. That is not what is taken into consideration. The demand for a stronger presence in society talks to what we are doing, the research that we speak about, what we were talking about over the last 2 days. This is what we talk about. I want to present to you Boyer's model, and this is not new. This is something that comes from way back when. Talks about what are we teaching and the value, and what is our educational purpose in terms of what we are driving. And then Discovery talks about the research. How are we transforming societal or addressing the societal problems and using the knowledge that we have? And then this integration, this interdisciplinarity that we're talking about. Is it just for our independence in terms of what we are wanting to do? Or are we able to say, what is the common good that we as a collective want to achieve? And then obviously the practical application is what I talk about in terms of context. For us to make progress, we need to co-design and we need to co-produce knowledge. Universities can be the vehicle to drive this cross-sectoral knowledge. But we need to speak and have the conversation around equity. We need to have influential conversations. We need to talk about how do we change the narrative in terms of those rankings, whoever decided upon them. So how do we have this conversation? I want to pose a few questions. I don't have the answers for you. I'm going to leave you more with questions than answers this morning. What is the pedagogy that guides us as a collective here in terms of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary? How do we rethink the way we teach, learn, and conduct research? What influences our research and educational programs? And so the question I want to ask us, do we need a signature pedagogy for inter- and transdisciplinary modes of producing and circulating knowledge to achieve SDG 2030? If not, then I leave here today. It's okay. But if yes, then we need to have conversations. We really need to talk about it. How do we do this? What do we drive? Pedagogy comes from teaching. And if we don't change the narrative, I'm not going to go through the old definition, but if we don't change the narrative, then the narrative is never going to change. Because we are the influencers, we are the change agents. We talk to our students, we engage with them on a regular basis. We have the conversations in terms of management, in terms of executive, but are we changing the narrative? What is our pedagogy? And there's different pedagogy approaches. It can be the constructivist, and I'm not going to go there because you are people better equipped to talk about it. But what about the collaborative one? What about the integrative one? What about the reflective one? What about the inquiry-based one? Can we have these conversations to change this narrative from competition to collaboration? But what does collaboration mean? Because I've had the experience back home where I would have liked to collaborate with universities, but competition was top of mind in terms of how people want to do things. So we talk collaboration. When we come into these spaces, yes, we'll collaborate. But when we go back into our universities, then competition is top of mind, even within our own faculties and departments. You don't even have to go outside, I want to say to you. So by training, I'm a physiotherapist, right? That's my background. That is how I understand it. I've been driving into professional education for years now, and so I have this concept in terms of what it is that I would like to do in terms of interprofessional education. And I just want to use it as a basis as we have the discussion towards this interdisciplinarity. So in terms of being a physiotherapist, there's professional training that gives students knowledge, and that we have in all, and it's very discipline specific. But we're talking around interprofessional education, and there are different disciplines that's going to come together. And so Schulman 2005 talks about when you are talking about your own discipline, you have to have surface structures, deep structures, and implicit structures. What I've now done is I've taken this and thought to look at it, what is our narrative in terms of interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity that we're wanting to talk about. So the surface structure is about, we have our individual identities as institutions. We know what we're wanting to drive as our institution. We know what goals we want to achieve. So we embed that in our research, academics in terms of teaching and learning, and our community engagement. But when we come to the deeper structures, when we talk about how do we share our skills, our values, and our identity with others, how is that entrenched in the contribution we make to curricular development, or to funding policies, or to ranking systems, or accreditation bodies? Are we able to, within this, change the narrative from competition to collaboration? Because we have the power to be able to do that. We are the voices. We sit on these committees. We have the influence. But are we making those necessary changes, or are we doing the same old same as we have been doing, as we have been taught to do over the years? And then implicit structure is, what is our moral foundations of our institutions, and how are our institutions situated relative to society and other institutions? And so through institutions' signature pedagogy, our students, our academics, and our staff become grounded in their identity, and therefore the impact they are able to make in society. Are we ready to have this conversation? Are we ready to talk about this? Do we need to relook the blueprints that define our signature ways of doing things in higher education? I want to pause to leave that question with you. Wilson et al. 2021 says that institutional cultural change is a process, and it is complex. But we need to address the things that is guiding us as higher education institutions in terms of world university rankings, open knowledge, multi-directional change, where individuals from grassroots have got an impact in what we decide is driving our institution rather than the top-down approach. So I ask again the question, why the need to move towards interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary? Why the imperative of becoming open institutions? And why the demand for a stronger presence in society through proactive engagement? This document really gives us the the power to say that we, as higher education institutions, we have a role to play. And it's not the word power, I want to say the mandate that we need to tackle societal changes as higher education institutions. So I ask the question again, competition versus collaboration. What does it look like for you? And this presentation was done before I was here yesterday, and yesterday one of the speakers used this African proverb. So I think we are in alignment. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, we need to go together. But are we ready to move together? And so are the isolated activities that we are doing at the moment, that we're talking about, that we're sharing with one another, is it leading to transformation? Are we able to achieve the SDG goals towards 2030 fast enough in the way we are doing things? What is the purpose of higher education institutions? I share this quote from our president who said, "Education is the great engine of personal development. It is through education that the daughter of a peasant can become a doctor, that the son of a mine worker can become the head of the mine, that a child of farm workers can become the president of a great nation. It is what we make out of what we have, not what we are given, that separates one person from another." It's a powerful quote, because this is what we as higher education need to do. Our slogan of our university is from hope to action through knowledge. And we are saying that education gives everybody who enters our gates the power to change their situation. We are not saying that we have the resources to give everybody everything, but what we can give you, you can go and make a difference. So I'm saying to you, let us not only focus on learning with each other or from each other or about each other, but to include the word because. Because the word because is going to answer what is our purpose in terms of what it is that we want to drive. How do we as higher education institutions become this vehicle that can make the difference in society? I'll give you a few ideas. I don't have all the answers, but I can't leave the stage without sharing some of my thoughts. And so the way forward in terms of the road to 2030, I think there's a need for us to understand our signature pedagogy for interdisciplinarity. There's a need for broader capacity development and training towards the SDG goals. We need to start the conversation of understanding university rankings and its purpose in alignment with the purpose of higher education institutions. What methodologies do we use for a stronger presence in society and partnering with other societal actors? And we need to promote the evidence for the effectiveness of these South-North partnerships that speak to collaboration and not to competition. As I end off, I want to ask you, why are we here? What is our purpose in terms of academics, researchers, staff that work in higher education institutions? What impact are we making? What is the meaning and what is our purpose? And how do we hope to achieve what it is that we have set out to achieve with these SDG 2030 goals? I thank you.
Prof, thank you very much for a very enlightening, very informative, and then I can say it all. If I was a Toyota Test, I would say that you stole my engine. But then, with that said, you have asked a lot of questions and provided a solution, of course, towards the end. Before I open, at least some few questions from the floor, I think it is also good and fair that I start by asking you at least one question, Prof. And it is going to be, can you give Prof something to write there? But it won't be a long question, really. one particular question is that now, in your view, what are the major barriers that hinders institutions of higher learning's integration or engagement with sustainable development goals? Beside the issue of competition, what really is that kind of a barrier? And do you think that we should, as universities or institutions, have annual sustainability reports like we do with other reports? In that way, trying to channel ourselves to a particular destination. With that said, we've got until, we started late, Dr. Mabila, we've got until 9. Yeah, until 9. But I'll go to 9:05, so that we can have a few questions, comments. I don't know if there's any question left, because you have asked all the questions, Prof. I don't know. But a hand, a comment. It was quite very clear, Prof. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
I'm always worried when I speak and I have a presentation and nobody asks questions. Then I wonder, did the message land? But I hope the message landed, because it's real that we need to have the conversations that we need to have. Barriers of integration to SDGs, there are various barriers. And I think what we need to realize is that yesterday we had someone from the Limpopo government speak to us. And when I saw the presentation, I was in awe in terms of understanding that government has got a plan, but how often do they share that plan that they have? Yes, we get the policy documents, so we can read policy documents, but if we do not create the awareness around this, then it's never going to become party to what we have. I'm going to answer this question from my university point of view. So we have been living SDGs at the University of the Western Cape. I'm a child of the University of the Western Cape. I've grown up in that university, so I know what I'm talking about. I come from what we call the Cape Flats, and here I stand today as a DVC, so I've been through the process. But I want to say, and my institutional planner sits here in this audience here today, so I must be careful what I say. We never articulated SDGs as part of our institutional operating plan until recently. It has only found a place in our institutional operating plan in the last 2020 to 2025 plan that we have. So it's now part of our DNA in terms of what it is that we are wanting to do. Now we can have broader conversations across the institution. We have had to do awareness creation around SDGs. Colleagues, the fact that you are sitting here and talking about SDGs does not mean that every person in your institution knows what SDGs is about. And that is what we realized within our spaces. And so we had to realize that there will always be barriers. But as a engaged university who operates in communities, we needed to articulate for ourselves what it is that we want to make a difference in and how we can make a difference. We cannot solve all 17 problems. We cannot look at all of the goals, but there are some of them that we as an institution can make a difference with. When we then decided that strategic partners is how we want to move our institution forward, we then looked at what are the areas that we are weak in. And so let's partner with others that can assist us in driving those areas forward. So, Chair, to answer your question, we need to go do some introspection within our own institutions and identify what are the areas that are barriers and then move it forward from there. Thank you.
Prof, let me just let you off really formally and with that decency, because you did us a good deal of great favor by going through this particular presentation. Dr. Mabila wants to wants to present something to you. I don't think you have to declare it. It's above, yeah, so there's nothing wrong about it. It's not a brown envelope.
Okay.
And with that, University of Limpopo, if we are trying to find solutions for Africa, we said, let's find solution for you with this little bag. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Just one last announcement. Dr. Mabila, you'll have to come to the podium. Perhaps it's better that you do the following announcements. And with that said, thank you very much for listening attentively. Thank you. I need my... This one.
Good morning, colleagues. We have a few announcements. Umesh will assist me. My colleague from Finland had some 2 flags which we agreed that we will keep them on the stage for especially this and the next plenary session. But more importantly, keep them visible throughout the day, even during the dinner, with our 6 o'clock candles lit, because today is Finnish Independence Day. And I can't pronounce this, but I'm going to try. Heaven, it's any fiver. So let's congratulate our Finnish delegates for celebrating this Independence Day. I had been inquisitive to say independence from what? I don't have to mention it. We just have to keep praying for our colleagues in, is it Croatia? The war is with what, by the way? Let's not mention names. We are not here for politics.
It's Ukraine and Palestine.
Ukraine and Palestine, yes. And this is the 105-year anniversary of the independence. This is quite a milestone. Congratulations, our Finland colleagues. I just want to see your flag standing somewhere here so that we, in collaboration with you, I'm going to use the collaboration instead of the other political words, celebrate this day. And also, I was asked to announce there is a board next to the poster displays, which was put there for people to put and stick their details for collaboration interests, so that as we go for lunch or other activities next to the poster boards at the Warriors, those who are interested in exchanging and networking about collaborations can make your details visible. We have already seen that people are using that board. One of the major purposes of this conference is collaborations. So we want to make sure that we provide ample time and opportunity for people to get their voices in terms of what do they need to collaborate in and where known. The posters themselves are on display, and today we also have about a set of about 4 posters that must be hanged there. One requests that during lunch in particular, the poster presenters must also use some few minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, hanging around their posters, and encourage all delegates to just make a turn and interact with the posters and the poster presenters. Other announcements, we'll make them at a later stage. We don't want to waste time. We've already lost some good time in this session. Thank you. I think we are moving to breakaway sessions. I am glad today it looks like we do have tea time. And I think the main station for our tea is going to be here when it's tea time and coffee time. The breakaway are still the same. We have this venue and we have the Day Lily and the Rose Room, which are close to each other just across the Warriors. And we have Merlin 2 and as well as Garden and Georgian next to each other across the garden, the Rose Garden. And then the SIGs, SIGs are all at Merlin 1. Merlin 1 is open for SIGs. Those who are interested in the SIGs, the same timetable, the venue is Merlin 1. I won't see this.
We are requesting these people.
Which ones?